harsh truth of professional sports business has now collided directly with the fearless ambition of a generational rookie. At this very moment, the Indiana Fever front office finds itself trapped inside a highly public and deeply complicated organizational storm. The executives behind closed doors believed they had engineered the perfect low-profile salary cap strategy. Their plan was simple: capitalize on a loophole within the new WNBA collective bargaining agreement, secure a 6 feet 4 inches elite sharpshooter on a restrictive developmental deal, and keep the entire situation under the radar. They assumed the fan base would never question it. More importantly, they expected Justine Pissott to quietly accept the arrangement, smile for the cameras, offer gratitude for the opportunity, and patiently remain buried at the bottom of the rotation while established veterans consumed the meaningful minutes. But everything changed the moment Justine Pissott stepped to the media podium at the Indiana Fever training facility and shattered the carefully crafted corporate narrative. She did not deliver a polished, rehearsed response. She did not rely on scripted public relations language. What she gave was something far more powerful: the raw, unfiltered voice of an elite competitor who fully understands her value to a championship-caliber basketball team. This was not a rookie speaking cautiously. This was a player making it clear she belongs in the real conversation. Welcome back to WNBA Pro, the unapologetic and fiercely analytical destination for the smartest basketball discussions online. If you came here for lazy box score recaps, surface-level reactions, or polished corporate media narratives built to protect executive reputations, then this is not the video for you. What we are uncovering today is far more intense. A psychological battle unfolding inside Indiana Fever training camp that could reshape the organization's future. We are dissecting the front office strategy engineered by General Manager Lynn Dunn, the deceptive salary cap mechanics beneath the surface, and the looming collective bargaining agreement deadlines that could soon force a painful roster decision. We are also examining the undeniable game footage from Barclays Center and the exact reason Justine Pissott is becoming the biggest disruption to Indiana's financial blueprint. To understand the scale of this situation, we first have to confront the financial strategy the front office attempted to execute, and how Justine Pissott publicly dismantled it on a national stage. Following the Fever's dominant 109-91 demolition of the defending Eastern Conference champion New York Liberty, a local reporter stepped forward during mandatory press availability and delivered the predictable, corporate-friendly softball question designed to maintain the narrative. The reporter asked whether having a developmental contract in place helped relieve some pressure as she worked to carve out her role, expecting a safe and measured answer. What followed instead was something far more revealing.
Indiana Fever's YouTube page.
Does it help having that developmental contract in place to kind of alleviate a little bit of the pressure on you as you try to find your way with things?
Honestly, not as much as you probably think. My goal is still to make a 12-player roster. But again, I'm super thankful that I'm even considered to be on that contract. But again, the main goal is to be able to come to the 12 spot.
Take a close look at the raw, unedited footage of her response because it stands as a masterclass in professional defiance. In that exact moment, she rejected the script that nearly every rookie is expected to follow. Most first-year players in professional sports, when confronted with that kind of psychological trap, immediately lean into the safe corporate response. They adopt the familiar, just happy to be here mentality that often defines the lower levels of competitive ambition. But Justine Pissott refused to participate in that performance. She looked directly at the reporter, held unwavering eye contact, and delivered a response that instantly shifted the tone of the room. She admitted that the contract did not ease as much pressure as people might assume, emphasized that her goal remained earning a 12-player roster spot, and made it clear that while she appreciated the opportunity, her focus was reaching that active roster. That mindset reveals everything. She balanced professionalism with fierce ambition, showing gratitude without surrendering her competitive edge. She walked the difficult line of media diplomacy while still putting the Indiana Fever coaching staff and front office on public notice. She sent a message across the WNBA that she is not here to settle. She wants a standard roster position, and more importantly, she believes she deserves it. Based on the reality of her debut against the Liberty, where she shot 2 for 4, scored 6 points in only 10 minutes, and posted an impressive +16 rating, her confidence is fully justified. But this conversation has to rise above emotion and move into the ruthless salary cap mathematics that created this entire crisis. Mainstream sports media continues to ignore the brutal financial reality that pushed Justine Pissott into this restrictive contract situation. The numbers reveal everything, and they expose serious front office mismanagement. The WNBA hard salary cap currently sits at $7 million, and the Indiana Fever aggressively committed major money to their veteran core during the offseason. Kelsey Mitchell is operating under a $1.4 million Supermax contract. Aaliyah Boston secured a fully guaranteed 4-year, $6.3 million extension. Caitlin Clark remains on her regulated rookie scale deal. Sophie Cunningham was brought in on a $665,000 contract, while Lexi Hull received an extension. Monique Billings is locked into a guaranteed 2-year agreement. Add in contracts for Damiris Dantas, Natasha Howard and first-round pick Raven Johnson, and the financial picture becomes crystal clear. By the time Indiana finalized its primary rotation and invested heavily in overlapping veteran depth, there was no meaningful cap flexibility left to offer Justine Pissott a standard guaranteed 12-player roster contract. The front office did not strategically hold back, they simply exhausted their resources. That leads directly into the mechanics of the WNBA developmental contract, a roster category many casual fans still misunderstand. Under the latest collective bargaining agreement, franchises can carry 2 additional players beyond the traditional 12-person active roster, allowing them to participate fully in every professional practice while remaining outside the guaranteed standard roster structure. They travel on charter flights, attend film sessions, train in the weight room, and participate in every strategic meeting alongside the full roster. In every practical sense, they live the life of a standard roster player, except when it comes to stepping onto the court. That is where the developmental contract becomes deeply restrictive. These players can only be activated for a maximum of 12 games during the regular season, just 12 appearances in a demanding 44-game WNBA schedule. That leaves 32 games where Justine Pissott is required to sit on the bench in street clothes, fully healthy and fully capable, yet legally unable to contribute. For a player who shot 42% from three-point range at Vanderbilt, stands 6 feet 4 inches, and possesses a smooth, nearly unblockable release with elite floor spacing value, that limitation is not development, it is confinement. This type of perimeter archetype is one of the most valuable assets in modern basketball, yet the organization has effectively restricted her to a fraction of the season. That reality creates not an opportunity, but a financial and structural cage. And Justine Pissott understands exactly what that means. That is why her tone during the press conference was so direct. She did not attack the organization, and she certainly did not demand a public trade. Instead, she made one thing unmistakably clear: the developmental contract is only the beginning of her journey, not the final destination of her professional career. And that is where this situation transforms into a tactical nightmare for head coach Stephanie White. The strategic chess match surrounding how Indiana deploys these restricted activations may become one of the most compelling storylines of the entire WNBA season. White now faces the difficult responsibility of deciding which exact 12 games will justify using Justine Pissott. That is not a simple coaching choice, it is a season-long logistical puzzle with serious competitive consequences. Does she activate Pissott for high-pressure matchups against elite defensive teams where her perimeter shooting could directly swing the outcome? Does she preserve those opportunities for the demanding second half of the season when veteran fatigue begins to impact performance? Or does she deploy them against smaller lineups where Pissott's 6 feet 4 inches frame creates a major mismatch advantage on the wing? The complexity deepens if an unexpected injury hits the roster early. If Lexi Hull or Sophie Cunningham suffers a soft tissue issue in the opening months, does White immediately spend Pissott's limited activations to patch the rotation? And if she does, what happens later in the season when the playoff race intensifies and there are no legal activations left to use? These are not distant hypotheticals. They are real strategic dilemmas that could shape Indiana's entire campaign. These are the kinds of brutal mathematical decisions that will ultimately define how the Indiana Fever manage their championship ambitions this season. But the most dangerous pressure point may not even be internal, it comes from the rest of the league. Here is the legal layer of the CBA that is being widely overlooked in mainstream coverage. Justine Pissott's exclusive negotiating window with the Indiana Fever has now officially expired. That single milestone changes everything, because it opens the door for every other WNBA franchise to legally present her with a standard, fully guaranteed 12-player roster contract. If a team like the Chicago Sky, desperate for perimeter spacing, or the Los Angeles Sparks, deep in a youth rebuild, or the Dallas Wings, looking to add shooting gravity around their core, decides they value a 6 feet 4 inches elite shooter who just delivered a strong debut performance against the Liberty, they can move immediately with a binding offer. At that point, Indiana is placed into a high-stakes retention scenario. The Fever hold a right of first refusal under CBA rules, meaning they can match any outside offer and keep her in the organization. But the critical catch is structural. Matching that offer would require converting Pissott from a restricted developmental deal into a fully guaranteed active roster contract. That is no longer a developmental gamble, that is a full financial commitment, a cap decision, and a roster displacement problem all at once. Which immediately pushes her new salary onto the $7 million hard cap, forcing that money to be accounted for within an already tightly constructed payroll. In practical terms, Indiana would have to create cap space that does not currently exist without disrupting the rest of the roster structure. That means the organization is suddenly confronted with an unavoidable roster consequence. Someone under a guaranteed contract would have to be moved or waived to make the numbers work. If a rival franchise applies pressure by extending a standard deal to Pissott, Indiana's front office is forced into an immediate financial decision tree. They can either cut an established veteran, still absorbing dead cap penalties while losing on-court stability, or they can decline to match and watch a 6 feet 4 inches floor spacing shooter leave for nothing, potentially strengthening a direct competitor. There is no neutral outcome here, only trade-offs with real competitive cost. This is exactly the kind of high-stakes roster calculus that separates efficient front offices from reactive ones. And right now, the Indiana Fever are operating inside a live pressure environment where every contract decision, every activation choice, and every cap constraint is interconnected. Managing championship expectations under that kind of financial restriction turns every roster move into a risk assessment, not just a basketball decision.
Putting in the work. Let's take a look at the work she's putting in.
Versatility to
16 points on the night. And book it before the Fever knocks it down.
There was no hesitation on that shot.
Look closely at the raw game tape that validates Pissott's impact, because once she enters the rotation against the New York Liberty, the entire defensive geometry of the floor changes instantly. She settles into a perfect ready stance, reads the closeout before it even develops, catches the ball cleanly, squares her shoulders in one fluid motion, and releases the deep three without hesitation or wasted movement. The shot is so quick and so high at the point of release that even elite Liberty defenders are forced into late contests that never truly affect the trajectory. What stands out even more is not just the shooting itself, but the spacing gravity she creates the moment she steps beyond the arc, dragging defenders away from the paint and opening driving lanes that didn't exist seconds earlier. Every possession with her on the floor forces a structural adjustment from the defense, because ignoring her is not an option and overplaying her instantly collapses help side coverage. That single skill set shifts how Indiana can operate offensively, turning stagnant sets into dynamic read and react sequences where one pass can completely break the defensive shell. You can see the coaching staff immediately recognize it on the sidelines, with subtle adjustments in spacing and tempo designed to maximize her floor spacing threat.
Rattle in from Pissott.
And here once again, you see she's ready for the pass. Catches it, look at hand up. Pretty close, look at that. Defense has the foot right on the line here. So pretty close, not a problem.
And she shows an undeniable ability to score under heavy physical pressure, rising cleanly over tight contests and trusting her collegiate shooting mechanics to deliver repeatable results even when defenders are draped all over her. That level of calm, unbothered shot-making is exactly why opposing front offices are already monitoring her situation closely, aware that players who can generate instant spacing like this rarely stay hidden for long. Inside the organization, the message is even clearer: she is refusing to be outworked by anyone in the building. The practice footage tells that story in detail. She is consistently the last player off the floor, alone on the court, putting up hundreds of game-speed repetitions, treating every session like a live audition. That kind of relentless consistency forces coaching staff to acknowledge her value not in theory, but in visible daily production. And this is where the real WNBA project scenario begins to take shape. The expectation is that her practice dominance becomes impossible to ignore, eventually pushing the Indiana Fever coaching staff to demand a mathematical solution from the front office before the All-Star break. Every day she is knocking down contested threes in scrimmages, showing she can operate as a legitimate offensive weapon rather than a developmental project, and proving she cannot be contained inside a restricted roster structure for long stretches of the season. The ideal outcome for Indiana is simple but demanding. She uses her limited 12-game activation window to force a full evaluation, proves she belongs in a permanent rotation role, hits her perimeter shots under real pressure, and delivers disciplined, reliable defense that translates beyond practice into winning basketball impact. She proves she can contribute in high-stakes minutes, and then the front office would ideally convert her to a standard deal at the mid-season point once the roster picture becomes clearer and they know exactly which veteran depth pieces they can afford to move in order to strengthen a playoff push. But the worst-case scenario, the true doomsday outcome that has Fever fans concerned, is that Justine Pissott becomes understandably frustrated by the limited playing time, watching long stretches from the bench in street clothes while other teams quietly monitor her situation and her agent receives interest tied to full roster opportunities elsewhere. At that point, patience becomes a resource just as valuable as talent, and if it runs out, Indiana risks losing a 6 feet 4 inches spacing threat simply because the initial roster construction did not create a permanent role from day one. Pissott has already been direct about where she stands mentally. She wants to play real professional basketball, not exist in a rotational waiting room. She believes she belongs on the floor, contributing in meaningful minutes, and her early performances suggest that belief is not unfounded. From a basketball standpoint, Indiana currently has a high-value perimeter shooter who looked comfortable in her debut against top-tier Eastern Conference competition. That is not a profile you bury long-term without consequence. That is a rotation-level asset being treated like a conditional experiment, and that tension between production and availability is exactly what defines her situation moving forward. We're building a serious basketball discussion space here that prioritizes roster construction, cap strategy, and real on-court impact over emotional narratives or surface-level hype. The goal is to understand how winning teams are actually built, through financial discipline, player evaluation, and smart long-term planning rather than reactionary decisions driven by short-term momentum. If you break the situation down strictly from a basketball operations standpoint, the entire conversation around Justine Pissott centers on 3 major pressure points: roster flexibility, development timeline, and opportunity cost. Indiana is operating in a tightly constrained environment where every contract decision has ripple effects across the entire roster structure. That means every activation, every minute allocation, and every depth chart adjustment is part of a larger cap-sensitive puzzle. The front office is not just evaluating talent, they are constantly balancing immediate competitiveness with long-term sustainability, and that balance becomes extremely fragile in a hard cap system. The central question is no longer simply should she be converted now or later, but whether her current production level is already strong enough to force a rotation decision regardless of contractual status. If she continues to translate her practice efficiency and limited in-game opportunities into consistent spacing, defensive effort, and low-mistake possessions, then the case for a standard roster conversion becomes increasingly unavoidable. In modern WNBA spacing-driven systems, a 6 feet 4 inches shooter who can stretch the floor at a high level is not a developmental luxury, it is a structural advantage that directly impacts playoff viability. That kind of skill set tends to earn minutes organically, even in crowded rotations. However, the developmental contract structure exists for a reason. It is designed to extend evaluation periods, allowing teams to avoid premature financial commitments until they have a complete sample size across different opponents, rotations, and late-game scenarios. This is where coaching strategy and front office discipline must stay aligned. If injuries, matchup demands, or rotation inconsistencies force early reliance on her skill set, the original evaluation timeline collapses. At that point, decisions are no longer planned, they become reactive, which is always more expensive in a capped system. When it comes to activations, coaching staffs generally operate with intention rather than urgency. Those 12 available games are typically mapped around opponent strengths, defensive matchups, and strategic windows where a specific skill set can be maximized. If Pissott proves to be a reliable floor spacer and low-usage efficiency option, those appearances shift from developmental trials into high-leverage tactical deployments. Each activation becomes a targeted tool rather than a simple evaluation checkpoint. Ultimately, the real storyline is not driven by speculation or emotional framing. It is defined by whether her actual on-court value begins to consistently exceed the limitations imposed by her contract structure. If that gap continues to widen, the organizational pressure naturally increases until a roster decision becomes inevitable. That is what determines her trajectory, not narrative momentum, but sustained production that forces the front office to align financial structure with basketball reality.